Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar series. Today, we've pulled together some great minds to discuss a topic that is of utmost importance and popularity, the Common Services Data Model, Demystified. First, I want to welcome the several hundreds of webinar attendees we have today. This is actually the most popular webinar we've had yet, with the most registrants we've ever garnered on this channel. So apparently, CSDM is definitely of interest this 2020. I'm your moderator, Devin Clark, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Brand and Demand here at Acorio. And it's my sincere pleasure to have a fantastic panel, which includes some of our brightest stars and practice leadership. They include Janine Osselborn, Acorio's ITBM practice lead. Janine spent the first 15 years of her career leading all facets of the global IT governance, including financial management, portfolio management, PMO leadership, business services, and quality for Fortune 500 companies such as Heinz and Mylan Pharmaceuticals. There, she gained critical experience working with consultancy partners and driving organizational change management. She moved from customer to consultant and founded her own company advising on the business of IT. We finally convinced her to join us at Acorio, where she is dramatically expanding our ITBM practice. We also have Mary Venata with us, and she is our senior consultant here with over 20 years of IT operations and service management experience in state and federal government, manufacturing, education, and finance industries. She moved from being a client to a ServiceNow senior technical consultant in 2016 and joined Acorio 2 years ago, bringing a wealth of practical knowledge in both management spaces and how they interact with each other within ServiceNow. And finally, we also have Larry Youngquist, a senior technical consultant at Acorio focusing on the ITOM and ITBM spaces. He is a seasoned IT veteran with 38 years of experience working at large enterprise organizations such as JP Morgan, focusing on application performance and systems management. Most recently, before coming to Acorio, he was a service portfolio manager at the General Services Administration, responsible for demand management and continual service improvement, as well as a CMDB and discovery. So you might be wondering, who is Acorio and how are we qualified to speak with you today? Over the past now 7 years, Acorio has grown from being that great boutique consulting firm to one of the premium brand players in the ServiceNow ecosystem. And along the way, we're gaining some national recognition. Today, we are the largest pure-play, exclusively focused consultancy in the ServiceNow partner universe, a global leader in product line and total certifications, as well as an elite partner. And we were recently named one of the best U.S. consultancies in any industry by SBI 2 years in a row. How are we seeing this growth? Well, the answer is why I'm here. It's why Janine, Mary, and Larry are here. It's because we put the customer first always and consider it our mission to drive real-world business outcomes and empower your ServiceNow journey by empowering now. Finally, I wanted to share a few quick tactics. This is an online session specifically designed to be a conversation among our team and with our audience. The Q&A interface is open, and we will be answering questions in real time or at the end of the session. If you want a point clarified or have something to add, please just type it into the BrightTalk interface question window. And because I know you will ask, we will make this an on-demand recording for this webinar, and you'll receive an email from us shortly after we finish. So with that interlude, I will hand the mic over to Janine to kick us off.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. This is one of our favorite topics, and we spend lots of time with our clients talking about this. So we think that what we'll deliver today will be the things that you're all wanting to know. We're going to focus on the CSDM evolution, why you're here, problems you might be experiencing today, what CSDM 2.0 is and how you can benefit, and then some real-world examples of where you can start from a crawl, walk, run perspective.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the CSDM. CSDM came about as feedback from you as the customer, as well as the maturation of the ServiceNow products with the realization that development of the platform cannot exist in silos. It provides solid definitions and data related to modeling your services in the ServiceNow platform. Business units within ServiceNow were tasked with identifying how service reporting could be improved. As of the New York release, there's no need to license a module to take full advantage of the Common Service Data Model reference tables within the CMDB unless otherwise noted. Janine, can you explain the changes that occurred in Kingston starting with APM?
Definitely. So 2 tables, the business capability and business application tables that are used within APM, were made available out of the box in Kingston, helping with the flow of data from other areas of the platform. And although this was a great thing in many ways, without great CSDM design, it became problematic for APM. And that's a big part of what we're here to talk with you about today. Tell us more, Larry.
Well, in London, the application service table that was originally part of service mapping was introduced and made available out of the box. And the reason behind this change, it was to ensure that services that would be consolidated to a single table.
So in Madrid, they came out with the Common Service Data Model 1.0 white paper. It was very high level. And although the definitions haven't changed, the graphic has been more prescriptive and definitive. With that, in New York, the service product model and information product tables were introduced into the CMDB. The service product model table allows for versioning, and information object table is there to capture metadata regarding the business application. Service offerings and service portfolio tables are available out of box now in New York. If you're a pre-New York implementation, never fear, you can still have access to these tables. You can install the free service management plugin to gain access to these tables. Also in New York, you're going to notice a change if you're a new customer using New York. You will notice in your incident and problem and change in your ITSM modules, there's a field called service available. In pre-New York clients, we see the table is still called business service. It hasn't been relabeled, but it can easily be relabeled to match the more generic name of service. So with that, we have seen some problems as consultants, as Janine has alluded. The CSDM 2.0 has released, it has addressed some of these problems related to modeling your services. But not all of the problems we see are organizational, maybe some organizational challenges. Larry and Janine, can you guys provide us some insight as to what you're hearing and seeing?
Sure. Reading left to right, the creation of customized tables to hold service data has caused some process and reporting issues for some clients. And sometimes as well as potential internal platform integration with other modules like APM or incident problem change. And the lack of architectural design and a lack of a core understanding of services in general in relation to those business applications are invariably, they're going to lead to a breakdown in operational processes. With regards to service management principles, ITIL principles, we often find no formally defined services, and if they are defined, sometimes the service owners and the IT technology owners aren't collaborating efficiently or effectively in order to deliver their respective services. In APM, Janine's seen other problems, and Janine, can you let us fill us in on those problems?
Yeah, definitely. So I spend lots of time working with our clients in the APM space, and point blank, we do a great many APM remediation projects because the business application table was used improperly with poor or no data design by a single team for a single purpose. ServiceNow is a platform, and the term Common Data Model in CSDM means that great care should be taken out of the gate to ensure that a service strategy is in place so that the corresponding data design will support not only your current needs, but those coming in the future. So we love APM. We want for this to be something that lays on top of CSDM and has that great design to support all of the wonderful benefits you can receive as a result. So Mary and I commonly collaborate to solve these problems for our clients. So tell us more, Mary.
Yes, Janine and I have collaborated on several projects between an ITOM project, maybe a CMDB health remediation, and working with her to make sure that data is available where she needs it in the APM module. So thank you, Janine. We want to recommend focusing, though, on the solution versus the problem. And here we have relatable solutions to each of the problems that Larry and Janine outlined. So one of the top solutions is if you have created some custom tables, let's say before you licensed APM, you may want to move away from the custom table and begin to use the out-of-box table that is now available to you. Again, without a license, you can start using this business application table. And then speaking to what Janine said, you need to plan and design, even if you're tactically making some decisions in change management or incident management, as far as how you're going to apply an incident against an application service. Realize, looking at the common service data model, this is going to affect what happens in APM under that business application table. So that plan and design is really something that it needs to occur, both for APM and ITSM and ITOM across the platform. You want to set up some governance committees, and we say this all the time whenever we're doing, whether we're doing an ITSM implementation, an ITOM implementation, or even an APM, ITBM implementation. You need to have a governance committee and set up some practices and define a roadmap. You also want to have some staff training. So once you get this implemented, you need to have staff trained. You need to crowdsource some of the manual input of the business applications and the manual input of the application services and mapping those. You're going to have to train your staff on this and crowdsource the amount of work that is out there. The definition of APM, just so everybody's application portfolio management. It's that evaluation and measuring and the performance of a business application. So that was one of the questions for you. And then another question was, should security applications be captured in the business application table? We can discuss that. We'll hold that for after the meeting, the webinar. And so we'll talk a little bit on the next item. Define your service owners and your services. So a lot of organizations we walk into, they might be a small organization. They may not have an IT business owner, service owner. They may only have an IT application service owner or a technical service owner. And so one thing when you're starting out with an IT incident management, change management implementation, is you want to start thinking about your services as early as that, and making sure again, that application services and business services work together. So let's talk a little bit about what the common service definition breakdown is. So CSDM, Common Service Data Model. And simply put, it's a standard set of service-related definitions that utilize the CMDB framework across the ServiceNow platform. For example, what's the difference between a business application and an application service? The data model is a CMDB framework that will enable and support multiple configuration strategies. We can talk about best practices related to the proper modeling of data using the out-of-box tables and relationships. Many ServiceNow products, as Janine has alluded to, have a dependency on that data within the model. CSDM is best practices for that CMDB data, the modeling and the management of the data. It provides overall guidance on how to model your services in the platform. It shows what recommended mappings you need to use between the tables within the core CMDB. so that you can ensure true service level reporting. Larry, can you speak to some of the things what the CSDM is not?
Sure. So just as important to what it is and how it can be used, it's also important to keep in mind what it isn't, what it is not. It's not an implementation guide for any of the ServiceNow modules or products. It's not a set of reports or code to write or implement. And it's not something that you wake up one day and you decide that, yep, today you have to do CSDM. It's not any of those. But most importantly, number 5 there, it's not going to define your business, your services for you, your application services or your business services. That's your responsibility. We've talked about design, and it's an essential part, and we can't emphasize that proper design is essential. Any amount of experience comes with a common lesson that architecture and design is fundamental and essential to all of IT, not just the CSDM. The CSDM will lay down the foundation for services and service management processes, but without proper design, like in this analogy, you might have windows on the ceiling, you might have tables attached to walls, chairs that you can sit in, great, chairs that you can't sit in. And another analogy often used that sometimes maybe you get one kitchen, maybe you get 2 kitchens, hallways and doors can lead into rooms, or maybe they don't. The whole point is that you need to take the time to plan, and we can't emphasize that enough. You need to design before you start. You'll save yourself a lot of rework, and like this picture, you won't require your coworkers to dance like Fred Astaire. And as a side note, just for those that don't get that Fred Astaire reference, you just need to Google it. With regards to the foundation design, you need to be aware of what CSDM is, and like we said, what it isn't, and account for it as part of the design right out of the gate, because it's going to affect everything moving forward on the ServiceNow platform.
Thanks, Larry. And for those that don't know, Fred Astaire had a great partner, Ginger Rogers, and I cannot dance like Ginger Rogers. I need a plan, I need a design, and I like color-coded ones. The Common Service Data Model has 3 domains that are loosely identified and color-coded so that they can be translated to the various ServiceNow product lines. The diagram introduces also the concept of a service owner there in the center that manages their assigned service, encompassing all the portions of the 3 domains. There are different persona archetypes that may evaluate, such as your enterprise architect, your application owner that's on the business side who cares about that application in the business. And then you have your technology owners, your application service owner that cares about, how is it working on the platform, and the technology service owner making sure that other technology consumers can achieve and receive the services that are provided. Also, we have the business consumers within this model, who's consuming on the business side. And we'll discuss a little later what the difference is between a technical service and a business service offering. The lines between those various ServiceNow tables represent relationships or references between the various data tables. As a whole, this diagram models the data through the strategy, design, operation, offering, and supporting of an entire service. Janine, can you define a little bit more what you, as a ITBM practice lead at Acorio, what are you seeing that, what do you want to speak to on the design side?
Yeah, so while designing an organization's business capabilities and business applications are common components of an APM implementation, this is often because APM is the catalyst for CSDM versus CSDM being approached as a key platform foundation and/or precursor to APM. We highly recommend considering the design, ownership, and maintenance strategies for these 3 elements as early as possible and well in advance of APM whenever possible. CSDM is an evolution. It's both the data structure and data development that most organizations need to support that big data that your executives are using to make critical decisions and for what's going to come next as the platform evolves. So being able to really focus on that design is critical. And you'll absolutely understand from a business capability standpoint more about your business that will help you for future design and development. So Mary, what about the technical services?
Yeah, so the technical services, and just to answer a quick question, we're seeing this aligns with the CSDM 2.0 model that is out, and I just wanted to call that out. But the technical managed services is defined by the light orange area you see on the left-hand side. It represents those tables currently used by IT operations management, such as service mapping, discovery, and the technical service portfolio of services provided for the technical consumers to consume. The managed technical service tables are operational. This is very important to understand that these are tables selected for ITSM, for incident, problem, and change. You see that the application service box. An application service is a service type that is a logical representation of a deployed application stack. It's, again, a logical representation. It's a container for everything that runs underneath it. You may have 10 servers running 10 executables. This here represents that whole application stack. The application services let you view maps and change history for those services. So again, this is where your incident, problem, and changes can be selected for those technical service offerings and the application service.
And Mary, we just have a question from the audience, if you don't mind. What's the difference between a service and an offering?
So the difference between a service and an offering is a service is a larger container. It may be something like Windows hosting or hosting services or infrastructure services or network services, something very high level. And then underneath you would have your different type of offerings. So under a network services, you might have something like, switches as a service offering, routers as a service offering. You may have something like a service offering for an application that may be a production environment that can be consumed by the application or by the technology consumer.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. I'll let you continue.
So thank you for that. That's a great question. And then to answer that, so we have the application service, and you can see a line between the sell and consume of that application service. Larry, could you speak a little more about, the area of sell and consume?
Yeah, that green area on the right-hand side, the sell and consume, this is really where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. This is how and where your business customers interact and consume the services that you've defined and offer to them. I mean, we operate IT for our business and our organization, and this is where reality comes in. And you can see that business consumer typically through a service catalog. They'll request a business service using a business service offering. That business service offering might be distinguished by different time of day, geography, a host of different factors. It might be underpinned by application services or even other business services, as you can see there. As I said, other factors can come into play on that service offering based upon the consumer, how they consume it. And in this domain, there's a business relationship manager persona that works with the service owner and ensures that those services offered are fit for purpose, that they perform per the expectations and per the needs of the business. And if they don't, then something is wrong, and those services have to be adjusted accordingly. So I think in our next, go ahead, Janine.
So this is Mary, and I wanted to answer one of the questions. Is a business consumer and an end user one and the same? Yes, essentially it's somebody who's consuming something in the business. It might be an employee accessing a Workday or Concur, or they need to request from the catalog access to one of those, maybe purchase a new laptop, and a difference between a technical consumer and a business consumer is the technical consumer might be a developer that's requesting the use to have a new server spun up so he can do some development work. The typical delineation is, what is this person doing? You would never see a business user actually getting in and using Active Directory, logging in and using Active Directory or using SCCM or Logic Monitor. You also, on the other side, would never, you may see a technology consumer accessing Workday or one of the employee type services or Word or any of the other enterprise type applications. So you want us to go ahead?
Oh, go ahead, Mary. I was just going to jump in and say, before we leave this slide or move on, I definitely would love for this team to be able to share their feedback on the roles. Each of us implements and does a little bit different as far as projects and client work, but I've definitely seen a trend from an APM standpoint related to many organizations not having an enterprise architect. So I think it's very critical that we speak to the roles and even having a blended role from an application ownership standpoint. So I think it's important for us to help our audience today better understand these roles and what they might want to establish from a people and process standpoint relating to the platform. So I didn't know, Mary, if you had insight on that.
Yeah, so when I'm doing an ITOM project or Larry's doing an ITOM project, we typically work, with, people from the network services team, especially when we're working in discovery and we're trying to get all of their switches and routers populated. We work, with the server team, as a technology owner. Application service owners, typically those we wouldn't necessarily work within an engagement, but they're very interested in making sure their application is being discovered and that there's an application service that represents that. Larry, do you have any other insight to offer there?
Well, there was a couple other questions that came in about the differences between business capabilities and business services. And typically the business capabilities is a hierarchy that the capabilities from the organizational perspective are capable of, not to use that word duplicitously, but those services and those service offerings basically deliver on those capabilities, and the primary difference is just delivery. Request catalogs was another question that came in. Recommended a portal for internal to IT or a different one for end users. Typically, request catalogs, which on the ServiceNow platform there can be multiple request catalogs, and I typically, and there might be differences in this, is that there would be a technical request catalog as well as a business request catalog. I think we can take some of these other questions at the end as well that we've devoted for some time for that.
Yes, all right, great. So we'll be moving on.
So Janine, can you tell us about some real world examples you've seen, and what are your recommendations? Should we implement all of this at one time?
So ServiceNow does not recommend trying to implement everything at one time. Acorio, because we work with so many different clients from different perspectives, does recommend that any organization establish a cross-functional data governance team who can design that crawl, walk, run, and we've added fly approach that meets your current and planned business needs as well as facilitates platform capabilities. This is the best way to ensure that your efforts are in concert versus conflict and that your design strategy is solid. So having that team really helps. But let's take a look at crawl.
Yeah, so in the crawl phase of an implementation or a remediation, because not all of our implementations are with new customers that are new to ServiceNow. Sometimes we're stepping in and we're doing a health remediation, and we notate that they need to align with the Common Service Data Model framework. So in that crawl phase, you want to focus on 4 core components. You want to have a healthy CMDB. Get that health advisory, get an analysis done. If you're a new implementation, you want to make sure you're planning out and assigning a configuration manager, and that you develop a strategy and have underpinning processes to keep your CMDB healthy. You want to then populate that business application table. And that business application table is manually populated. It requires a person to enter that information in. You want to create a corresponding application service and create a consumes by consumes relationship so that the business application consume that information from the application service. And then you want to add a service field to your incident, problem, and change records to collect the data to be consumed by the business application and the APM and the application portfolio management application within ServiceNow. So then you, as Janine, coming from that business aspect, you want to start thinking always about the next step. So you want to start thinking about your technical services and offerings, especially if you've done a discovery implementation. What is a technical service? What are you offering? And start to plan those out before you implement them in the next phase. Janine, do you have any recommendations for, actually, let's take a look at the next slide here and dig in a little bit. So again, we mentioned that we focus on the 4 stages. So we have the business application, and I see some questions regarding what is a business application, and an example would be SAP Financials. Maybe it's the FICO platform. It could be Concur, it could be Workday, it could be ServiceNow, and those are applications. It could be a homegrown application. A business application would care about the end of life, the length of the contract, how much longer should this, to provide all of the data for the enterprise architects and the application owners to make that decision whether to deprecate, upgrade, or replace that business application. And then we have the application service there. An application service, again, is that logical representation of all of that business. And you can have 3 or more. You can have more than one. It's not a one-to-one relationship. You may have, for example, SAP Financials as a business application, and then an application service under that could be related to general ledger or accounts payable or accounts receivable or asset accounting. And you also can have what we call leaf nodes. So you can have business applications with business applications underneath it. So although this diagram is very flat, know that you can have a business application with a business application under it, and then you can have corresponding application services. Your application services also may represent different environments or geographical locations. So you may have SAP Financials accounts payable prod, and then all of the CIs that are related to those production, application services.
Mary, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in with a few questions. One is, if the application services are entered in the service field, what items would be used as affected CIs in the IPC?
So in the crawl phase, very minimally, you can start out with utilizing the application service, so as a place to put your incidents. And then for example, an issue comes in related to the SAP accounts payable. At the very least, your service desk can put an incident, problem, or change against that service. Then as it routes over to your server team or your application team, they may determine that it is the server. And so they would then populate the incident record with that. When you get into the walk phase and you build out your technology, technical services and service offerings, that's when that comes into play, where it can be more automated to know, and especially after a service mapping engagement, what CIs is tied to that exact application service. Okay, and then I have one more question, then I'll let Janine carry on.
is, wouldn't most organizations have service catalogs? What role do they play in the crawl phase?
So, and this is a big question, and I'm so glad you asked, because in a lot of implementations, we went out there, we started out with incident, problem, and change. We got a portal, we got some catalog items out there. And so in many ways, those catalog items, the business service catalog item that you may have out there that says, you know, request a laptop, doesn't tie back to your business service or your capabilities or even your technical services. So the recommendation is to get realigned with the CSDM if you've already implemented a service catalog.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. And with that, I'll let Janine start off with walk.
Thanks so much, team. So one of the things as we're advising our clients that I advise early on is to set your goals for CSDM early in your process. Know how you will use this data and where. Make sure that you're set to achieve those goals. Although your steps will be crawl, walk, run, you want to keep your eyes on the horizon and on that ultimate destination. So you want to be sure that you're planning for the entire platform in a comprehensive way. So from an IT operations management standpoint, focusing on the health of that CMDB that you seeded in that crawl phase, make sure it's scalable for planned growth in the future. You want to implement your technical services and service offerings, so that's that next step in service development. From an ITSM perspective, carefully plan your business services and service offerings and their relationships. The business service, business capability, business application alignment is the key to associating business applications with incidents, problems, and changes for critical APM cost modeling and reporting. Plan your APM journey at this stage. Be certain that all parties are at the table to set the stage for data and process relating to those base business applications. Set governance guidelines to ensure that alignment between these parties remains intact as new features are launched. So important. We see this with our remediation projects. We see that probably the number one reason why they're remediating is that they didn't have everyone at the table when they did the original design. So that's critical. It's a little thing that can matter a lot. Understand the data sources that support the APM dashboards and reports. Set expectations along those lines and create a plan to prioritize the population of that data. This is all part of that evolution, the crawl, walk, run. You won't have all of that data available out of the gate. So think about what's most important to you. Create that plan to prioritize the population of that data. As much of it is related versus single source. So it's through the building of the CSDM relationships that you'll get the most value. Cost modeling and service tickets, incidents, problems, and changes are two examples of that related data required to provide that full picture. So Mary's going to take us through that, more about walk on the next slide.
Yeah, so as Janine mentioned, the next piece of that implementation is building out your technical services. By this time, and this may kind of occur fairly quickly in an implementation where you're doing a crawl and you're doing a discovery and you've started planning out your technical service offerings. You've had a recommended advisory on what a common service data model should look like, and your organization is full speed ahead, or you may be an organization that needs to remediate. At this point, you're going to hopefully have all of your servers populated in the CMDB. Your CMDB is nice and healthy. You're going to have all your switches and routers, and then you can begin to build out, what is it we offer? Well, we offer Windows servers. Do you offer 2016, 2019, 2012 R2? How many gigabytes? You can break those service offerings down to where you can have many offerings under the technical service, or you can just be very generic and say, we offer Windows servers and we offer Linux servers. And you actually have the ability to manually connect all of your let's say server CIs to that technical service offering of Windows Server. And then your technical service you would develop that out. You would assign a technical a service owner. Additionally, if you've done discovery, and one of the biggest problems we see is when incident problem and change was implemented, applications were manually populated on that what we would in that little box under CIs, under a application table. And what happens is when you turn on discovery, it will create duplicates. It doesn't contain the information you need. If you put that application that you're going to claim incident problem and change on the application service, then that data then is consumed up to the business application, helping the business, the decision makers consume that information. Again, your technical service offering and your application service can contain your support group, your approval group, so that you're not having to populate thousands or tens of thousands of CIs with a support group or approval group for incident or change. Just to get a little more definitive, a technical service is just meant to identify that provider of the technology that your business consumes. A technical service offering may be broken into options based upon geography, environment, non-prod, prod, pricing, availability. Again, that's where you have your support and approval groups. And I can assure you that ServiceNow has not stopped here. They are looking at ways to improve, those areas of the service offering. Beginning with the application services, where you want to start. So somebody asked if I could give another example of a technical service offering versus a technical service. I would start with saying a technical service is network services. Technical service offering could be Cisco routers. It could be firewall. It could be, that type of offering underneath that technical service. And then I see, was it mentioned that incidents should be on an application service and not CIs? It can be on both. We actually recommend, if it's an application service, you would actually put the incident against the application. End user calls in, they're just going to give you a generic name. My SAP accounts payable is not working. I'm having a problem with Word. And that's the application service. But the CI might be a server, it might be a router, it might be a switch. And until you use service mapping, you will have to use tribal knowledge to determine what the actual CI is. So it says, how is the ITOM event management improved by each CSDM journey step, or which step has the greatest impact of quality? So again, you want to make sure event management works the way it does, is that you build out those technical services such as hosting services and the technical service offerings such as Windows servers, and then event management can utilize those technical services. So the next part we want to talk about is that request catalog. And I saw a question on here. The request catalog, there can be two separate catalogs, the technical catalog and a business service catalog. And that helps with having to make sure you don't have business people requesting a service. And contracts would be related at the business application level. There is a reference field within the business application. So to move on, Larry, can you tell us what happens after you've got your technical services up and running, and what's next as far as a run?
Yeah, so you find yourself, you're in the run phase based upon your platform, and you want to use the CSDM, and it may be more difficult depending on how much customization has been performed to date. You might have gone through many different releases and many different projects that have modified and customized your platform. So a self-assessment is always important. You can determine how aligned you find yourself with the CSDM. Where do you fit on this spectrum that we've been showing so far? If you've developed and defined your services in custom tables, as we've kind of warned against, and you've developed internal processes that integrate those services with incident, problem, or change, you might find that you need to do some remediation, and some serious remediation may be required. So you might need to move or migrate data utilizing planning and great care to maintain your legacy reports, all of the information that you might have on dashboards or reporting mechanisms or other processes. Those processes might need some serious organizational change. You know, processes rely on people, and people need to be trained and informed on what the process is, on how we can support CSDM. And one positive benefit, you know, you might see all that as negative, like, oh my God, I've got to do a lot of remediation. But one positive benefit, you can actually look at it as an opportunity and look at process reengineering. You know, you can utilize lean IT principles to look at your processes, to look at your legacy data, determine what the proper need and requirement is, and maybe make modifications at the same time. And so in this run phase, you start defining your business services and service offerings, as Mary said, as opposed to just the application services and technical services. These are business services are the ones that are exposed to that business consumer persona that we saw before. And if you haven't already, then you start defining the business service catalog. And I think a couple of questions came up about whether that was the same as the technical service catalog. It is not. It is one focused for business consumers. And then when you have this, with all these 4 phases in mind, and you have this platform based upon the CSDM, then it puts you in a position for future roadmap activities like event management, as Mary said, service mapping, if that's on your to-do list, portfolio management, and cost management, showbacks and such. One of the elements in our webinar today was an example. We wanted to provide some examples of the run state, and one I just wanted to talk about a little bit was an example of a customer that came to us in that state. Our first step was to prepare and plan like we recommend. We formulated a plan for the application portfolio management deployment. We performed a CMDB assessment, and out of that assessment came the necessary remediation actions that had to take place, that movement or migration of data while retaining some of the relationships and some of the metadata that might be associated with those custom tables. We also did an application assessment for a set of business applications, not the entire portfolio of business applications, but we started to develop an onboarding process, basically refining how business applications and services come into your environment. You know, what's the process that needs to be established so that training and that organizational change can take place? And getting those business owners and IT owners in the fold as full-on service owners and working on developing the communication and training that they require to become service owners. And then if an enterprise architecture framework is in place within the organization, mapping the CSDM to your taxonomy, your existing taxonomy, and making sure that everybody's communicating with one set of terms and terminology. For the remediation part, then we started to develop scripts to move and migrate those records carefully. We don't typically delete any CIs or any records, but we will mark things inactive as appropriate, move and migrate records into the proper tables that the CSDM calls out, ensure that we can reestablish any relationships within the system that are required for those processes. There's another field about the application service software model, make sure that those are complete and correct. And then we extracted the historical data from incident problems and changes. If those were pointing to those custom records, we want to make sure that they repoint to the current and new CSDM tables. The updated processes need to be deployed. As I mentioned, the application onboarding and offboarding is extremely important to utilize that new framework, that new CSDM framework. And we want to make sure that the service desk, there has been a couple of questions about how to tag a application service within a ticket, or what CIs would be used to ensure that the affected CI calculation is done properly and impact analysis is done properly. So there's training involved with that as well on those new processes. And once that's done and you're in the run phase, then what ServiceNow calls the fly, you can start learning some of the capabilities like the CMDB query builder to visualize services, report on them, report them appropriately, validate that the analytics that might have been captured are still being captured in the proper manner, and that you can start performing service portfolio management holistically for the entire organization. One element that we haven't talked about so far is the information objects is a new CI class that has been introduced that in the New York version that looks very interesting for tracking sensitive data and making sure that regulatory compliance is done. I think we can move on to the next slide.
All right, so when you've knocked all of that out, come on back to APM. When these components are in place and are well designed, adding APM and achieving the full benefits that it has to offer become much easier. When APM has access to all of the relational data through the CSDM model, APM reports, dashboards, and analysis features provide really comprehensive details needed to rationalize business applications, assess their health, understand their cost, and a basis to make decisions about how best to serve the associated business capabilities in your organization. When you approach CSDM first, an APM project is icing on an already delicious cake. When you approach CSDM only because of an APM project, an organization can put itself in a position of making poor calls relating to design because of a project timeline without having all of the parties at the table. Two common situations that could have been avoided by having great CSDM design before APM are, number one, having more than one group trying to leverage the business application table at the same time for different purposes. I've actually had automated feeds that have come in from one group and overwritten the data for another that was trying to build APM. Because they weren't aware that they were both leveraging the same table for different purposes. The second is really a huge delay in APM projects, and that's just because by the time we get in and we're meeting with you and we're talking with you about implementing APM, if we're just then starting CSDM, it will absolutely delay your time to benefit for APM. So we absolutely advocate start with CSDM and then add APM. At that point, you've done a lot of that prerequisite work and you're ready to really get the full benefits in fly mode of your APM. So have that enterprise reporting strategy for APM, build that credibility by establishing the CSDM first. So let's talk common, let's talk actually, where do you stand from a crawl, walk, run phase and how do you know? Larry?
Well, to recap, we're all unique. For the crawl phase, we've identified that business applications and application services are defined. It's critically important to have a healthy CMDB. For walk phase, this is where technical services come into play, that you manage and define you define and manage your technical service offerings, and that you might be considering discovery as a potential piece of automation for your CMDB. And then the run phase, the definition of a business service catalog is important. Service owners need to be assigned, trained, and actively managing their services. And at this point, we'd believe that you'd be looking at service mapping as an option. So based upon that assessment, we have a few common threads that we want to wrap up with. Mary, can you start us on the common threads?
You might be on mute, Mary.
Well,
Sorry about that. Yeah. So you want to ensure you have a viewpoint and vision for your platform. And as both Larry and Janine and I have pointed out, design, and then design some more. You wouldn't, to the house analogy, you're not going to build a new home unless you've had an architect draw out the blueprint. You want to respect your legacy processes and requirements. However, you don't want those to impede your process. Again, you want to have that foundational architecture, and you want to know what your resource requirements and capabilities are with and without automation. I think that's a big key that we see a lot of people saying they can map all of their services, but it's a little difficult to map, you know, a whole vCenter environment or a whole data center environment. So service management also is the key. Make sure whatever you're doing in service management, it has a purpose, right? You're not just keeping incident records because it's fun to do and it tracks someone's workload, or it provides routing. It also provides a reporting. You want to make sure you're getting actionable reports out of service management. And then practice restraint in building. Can you have your developer script everything? Yeah, maybe, but should you? Probably not. So with that, we can wrap up. We may have a minute or two for questions. We'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Mary. So just in summary, the information we just shared is an introduction to where most of our clients start with their CSDM design. Use this as a starting point on your journey to learn and plan your own strategy to leverage the power of the ServiceNow platform at this very critical foundational level. CSDM is designed to ensure that our clients receive the most from their platform across all application areas and should be in your platform roadmap as a springboard for maturity and growth. So hopefully we were able to provide you with some great backdrop to get started today. So Devin?
Thanks, Janine. And we do have a few more moments yet left, so I will try to answer a few while we have the time. Mary, would it be wrong to create an incident or change on the business application instead of the application service?
Absolutely. That's why we have the application service. Trying to think of this again, back to the personas. The business application tables are designed for your architects, your service owners, the business. Incident management for service management happens at the service level. So you would definitely want to put it on the application service and if it happens to be the application that's causing the problem, you would select the application service with the corresponding application that's actually running on that particular server.
Perfect. And I think we'll just end on one last question before we finish up is mention of business application hierarchy.
So yes, again, you can have a business application such as a platform like ServiceNow, and then you can have a business application like ServiceNow Incident, ServiceNow APM, ServiceNow Change Management can be hierarchical, and then your application services can correspond to those.
Perfect. Thank you. And I know we have a lot of questions that are unanswered right now. This was a very hot topic. So we will be sure to try to get to each of your questions offline following the webinar. And so thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers for all of your deep expertise and your answers to these questions. If you have any additional questions, you can feel free to add them to the question interface window in BrightTalk, or you can reach out to us directly at marketing@acorio.com. Thank you all for joining us.